Next on Currents News, Debate Night 1, a square-off between progressives and moderates. At the center of the back and forth, the biggest question, who will energize enough voters to win back the White House? And ready to do it all over again? Round 2 tonight. President Donald Trump officially ended family separations at the southern border last year. But a new lawsuit says immigration authorities have removed nearly 1,000 migrant children from their families. And Vatican City is making some big changes to clean up Mother Earth. Plus, the story of a love that will weather any storm and a party that will leave you thinking only in New Orleans. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Tamara Lane. Ideological lines were drawn early and often during last night's presidential primary debate. Prospects all shared the same stage, but the showdown was between the progressive and moderate wings of the Democratic Party. The big question leading into tonight's round 2, can the party unite to beat President Donald Trump? Right off the bat, the big showdown on the debate stage wasn't between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. It was Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren defending their progressive positions on issues like border security and health care against more moderate candidates on the stage.
I'm the only one on the stage who actually has experience in the healthcare business, and with all due respect, I don't think my colleagues understand the business. We have the public option, which is great.
With two top-tier progressives taking center stage, moderate candidates further back in the polls tried to make a case for Democrats taking a different direction.
That is incorrect. I just have a better way to do this.
This notion that you're going to take private insurance away from 180 million Americans, you might as well FedEx the election to Donald Trump.
This is an example of wish list economics. It used to be just Republicans wanted to repeal and replace. Now many Democrats do as well.
Let's be clear about this. We are the Democrats. We are not about trying to take away health care from anyone.
With a much steeper bar for the next round of debate entry, some taking one more chance to get voters' attention on the national stage.
You don't know that,
Second
Bernie.
of all,
We'll come to you in a second,
I do know, and I
Congressman.
wrote the damn bill.
Everything that we're talking about here tonight is what's wrong with American politics.
Candidates also touched on gun control.
High school is hard enough without having to worry about whether you're going to get shot.
And the best ways for Democrats to defeat President Trump come next year.
There's a new battleground state, Texas.
Tonight, it's the New Yorkers' turn to take the stage. State Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and Mayor Bill de Blasio will face off. We'll also hear from the frontrunner, ex-Vice President Joe Biden. And later in this broadcast, we'll be joined by Patrick Harris, a member of the American Solidarity Party, a Christian grassroots party for people seeking a third way of confronting the issues facing Americans, one that is a lot less left and right. We'll talk all things polarizing and how a Christian voting with their conscience can make sense of it all. Round 2 begins tonight. Immigration was one of the hot topics last night, a conversation that comes on the heels of the American Civil Liberties Union accusing President Trump of continuing the separation of families at the border. The group says the administration is using an exception allowed by the federal court that permits separation if parents are unfit or dangerous to a child to continue the practice. As a result, the ACLU says more than 900 children have been separated from their families since June of last year. Trump officials have said separations are extraordinarily rare and are done in the best interest of the child. Meanwhile, the ACLU and Planned Parenthood are also suing the state of Missouri over their new abortion law, one of the most restrictive in the country. The pro-life legislation bans abortion after 8 weeks of pregnancy, including in cases of rape and incest. The two groups are arguing that the law is unconstitutional, and they want a temporary restraining order to stop enforcement until the lawsuit is decided. President Trump's lawyer is vowing to fight a new bill that requires all presidential candidates to disclose 5 years of tax information. Failure to do so forbids them from appearing on the state's primary ballot. The bill comes from California's Governor Gavin Newsom, called the Presidential Tax Transparency and Accountability Act. The law requires candidates to file IRS returns at least 98 days ahead of a primary election. For the first time in more than a decade, the Federal Reserve is cutting interest rates. The move comes in an effort to guard the record-long economic expansion against mounting global risks. In particular, the cuts are meant to protect against potentially harmful effects and uncertainty from the trade war with China. New details tonight about the murder of an Italian police officer allegedly by two Bay Area teenagers. The parents of one of the teens are speaking out, saying they are distraught. The statement from Gabriel Yorth's father comes as news of the other teenager involved was once accused of assault back in the United States. Stacey Cohan has the story.
Gabriel Natali Yorth's father makes a statement to journalists over the phone. His 18-year-old son is jailed in Italy, accused of taking part in the murder of an Italian police officer.
Gabriel is distraught by what happened and cannot come to terms with it. We are deeply upset by his predicament, while at the same time fully convinced of his innocence.
California teens Yorth and 19-year-old Finnegan Elder were arrested over killing 35-year-old Carabinieri police officer Mario Circello Rega after allegedly stealing a backpack in a botched drug deal. Rega was stabbed 11 times and was unarmed.
Circello didn't have a weapon with him. He had forgotten it.
Police say both teens admitted to the assault, but only Elder is accused of stabbing Rega. Police found a 7-inch knife in the teen's hotel room, which Elder allegedly brought from the U.S. Yorth's father says his son did not know Elder was armed.
He's devastated by the Carabinieri's death, and I, for one, as a father, painfully feel his family's grief.
The San Francisco Chronicle reports Elder was charged with an assault in California 3 years ago after he was involved in a fight that left another person critically injured. Stacey Cohan, Currents News.
It's been 6 years since an Italian Jesuit priest disappeared. The last time anyone heard from Father Paolo Dallio, he was just about to enter Raqqa, not long before the city became a jihadist stronghold.
Hope is alive because we're full of hope, even considering what may have happened to him. Going beyond hope, we need information and justice. Many times, anything can happen, anything. But Paolo's fate is no longer up to us. It depends on another with a capital A.
During a news conference marking the anniversary of his disappearance, Father Dallio's family said all of these years later, they are feeling a renewed sense of help since Pope Francis's recent letter to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The letter from the Jesuit Pope demanded the release of all those who've been detained. The family hopes Father Dallio is among them. Vatican City has an announcement to make. The tiny territory will no longer be selling any single-use plastic items. Inspired by the Holy Father, the change comes on the heels of his papal push to clean up Mother Earth and an ongoing Vatican effort to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Melissa Butts has the story from St. Peter's Square.
Single-use plastics such as these plastic cups will no longer be sold inside the Vatican in an attempt to reduce their plastic waste. The smallest state in the world, the Vatican produces 1,000 tons of trash every year. Meanwhile, according to the European Union, world plastic production has gone from 1.5 million tons in 1950 to 322 million tons in 2015. That same year was when Pope Francis published his encyclical on the environment, Laudato Si. Now the Vatican City state is following his written words. Education can encourage ways of acting which directly affect the world around us, such as avoiding the use of plastic. We seek to follow the Holy Father's words in Laudato Si, that to rebuild or safeguard the common home, we must reuse or recycle waste, maximizing their efficient use. This effort is being organized by Raffaele Tornini. He explains the goal is to eliminate all plastic that cannot be recycled and differentiate between the rest of the trash. What we're trying to do is stop the sales of single-use plastics. That means cups, plates, straws, and anything that's not recyclable. With the rest of the recyclable plastic remaining in the Vatican City state, it will go in their ecological island, which was created in 2016. This storage point for recyclable waste within the Vatican Gardens helps ensure plastic is reused to make other products. In the United States, 35 billion plastic bottles are trashed each year, with only a quarter going to recycling. Maybe Americans should also take note of their excessive plastic waste, which is enough to circle planet Earth 4 times. At the Vatican, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
News tonight out of Puerto Rico. The ousted governor, Ricardo Rosselló, announcing his intended successor. 2 days before the disgraced leader is due to resign, Rosselló has named Pedro Pierluisi as the next head of the island's government. Pierluisi is a member of Rosselló's political party and served as Justice Secretary under Rosselló's father. Some members of the Puerto Rican House and Senate are already planning on blocking his nomination, citing a conflict of interests. There's a lot more news headed your way. We'll dissect the debate, helping Christians navigate the back and forth and vote with their conscience. The Sheen Center is introducing this year's new shows and performances. It's a lineup that cannot be missed. Plus, a Catholic couple that exchanged their vows during one of the biggest storms of the year. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. The second round of Democratic debates quickly turned into a progressive versus moderate showdown as low polling candidates sought to break out of the pack by targeting the top guns on stage. Here to help us break down the night is Patrick Harris, a member of the American Solidarity Party, a Christian grassroots party for people seeking a third and less polarizing way of confronting issues. Patrick, thanks for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the big draw from last night, the progressives on the stage, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. Can you tell us what differentiates those two candidates for Christian voters, and how did their performance last night affect them in the polls?
Well, I can't say for certain how it's going to affect them in the polls, although both of them are clearly leading contenders for the nomination. As far as the kind of policies that they were talking about, though, they had a lot of big plans, everything from Medicare for all to free college tuition, and I think some of those ideas are better than others, but in one sense they don't go far enough, which is they don't really challenge a system that leaves too many people without responsibility for their own economic security. In the Solidarity Party, we talk about the need for a distributist economy that supports families and local communities, worker-owned businesses, small businesses, things like that, that really give people a stake in our national prosperity, and that's something that I'd like to see more of.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the candidates that are polling lower. Did any of those candidates break out of the crowd last night?
Well, I think a lot of people paid attention to Marianne Williamson and her rather peculiar way of expressing herself, but she actually had a lot of good things to say. One of the things that stood out to me was that she said that our economy has become a false god in some ways, and I think that's there's a lot to that. I think that in too many cases we think of the economy as something that people need to serve or that need to meet the needs of the economy instead of the economy serving the needs of regular Americans.
Okay, well, so now many people watching may not agree with President Trump on everything, but they may be afraid that some of these candidates are moving too far to the left. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I understand those concerns, particularly not so much in this debate, but in some of the previous debates. There was a lot of attempts by the candidates to sort of out-extreme each other on the abortion issue. And I'm willing to give credit to the president where it's due in standing up for the rights of the unborn. But for Christian voters in particular, I don't think that's enough. I think that they need to be able to live out their values in politics across a whole host of issues, you know, to have a consistently pro-life view, which would mean not just looking at the legality of abortion, but also the circumstances that lead women to feel like they have no other choice, and to take responsibility for those things. And I don't think the Republican Party is doing that, and I don't think Christian or Catholic voters should allow themselves to be taken for granted that way.
Well, and there's a lot more about looking out for life, which includes some of the American Solidarity Party's principles, which align with the Christian faith, which are, for example, the sanctity of life, immigration reform, pathways to citizenship, robust health care, insurance for all, and so on. So how do Christians use their conscience to guide them through these turbulent times right now?
Well, I think the fundamental thing that we need to keep in mind is that our politics should be based on looking at the dignity of every human being. And that's going to guide how we vote when it comes to abortion. It's going to guide how we vote when it comes to immigration with economic policy. And these things don't need to be separated. They don't need to be pulled apart.
And quickly, what can we expect tonight? We have New Yorkers on the stage.
I'm going to be looking out in particular for Tulsi Gabbard. She got a lot of attention at the last debate, particularly talking about foreign policy. I think there's a foreign policy consensus that needs to be broken, and she's trying to do that. So I am particularly interested to hear from her.
Patrick Harris of the American Solidarity Party, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Candidates last night frequently accused the president of being a racist. A new poll is asking voters this straightforward question: do you think President Trump is a racist? More than half of Americans, 51%, are answering yes, while 45% said no. To break it down even further, 80% of African American voters said yes and only 11% said no. Among Latinos, 55% agreed Trump is a racist and 44% disagreed. And for Caucasian voters, 46% answered yes and 50% said no. In the Diocese of Immigrants, Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio is committed to combating the sin of racism. In his column in this week's tablet, he talks about a special commission started to fight America's so-called original sin. At the same time, the diocese is empowering young people of color with a special retreat. Editor-in-Chief Jorge Dominguez joins us now to give us a preview of stories you can only find in the tablet. Jorge, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tamara.
Tell us about Bishop DiMarzio's column. It's about the Racism Commission, started after events in Charlottesville nearly 2 years ago. What did they find?
Well, before we talk about what they did find, it is interesting to say, people think it's that Bishop DiMarzio wanted to talk about racism in our society. When you read the column, the surprising thing is, no, he wanted to talk about racism in the church. He says we have to start at home. So the 4 listening sessions was to talk about racism inside the church. And they say that the 2 main findings that they did, that they find out in these meetings was, one, that racism is not just a white, black issue, because we are such a multicultural diocese. You have different expressions of racism. And the second thing was that clergy in general are very, very uncomfortable to talk about racism. So it is very necessary.
Well, over this weekend, some leaders in the church wanted to empower young people with a retreat just for them. Tell us about what happened there.
Well, that was the 27th edition of Kujenga Conference. It is a conference for Black young Catholics to form leaders in love. That's what they call it. And it was 47 young kids from our diocese and from other dioceses that got together just to form leaders in their community, because we really need young leaders.
Jorge Dominguez, editor-in-chief of The Tablet, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
The Tablet needs your support to ensure that Catholic journalism will thrive well into the future. You can do so by subscribing to The Tablet so that it comes right to your mailbox. You'll save up to 55% by having it delivered to your home versus paying for it at church. Go to the website thetablet.org/home55 or call 877-883-8356. And the Tablet has a brand new page called Our Diocesan Family, where you can share your pictures of recent baptisms, Holy Communions, confirmations, marriage, all the joyous sacraments. For more details and to submit your photos, go to thetablet.org/ourdiocesanfamily. Your picture may be published in an upcoming issue of the newspaper. Care for some art and culture combined with the Catholic faith? Well, the Sheen Center in downtown Manhattan has now unveiled its fall season, packed with performances that cannot be missed. Actress Vanessa Williams hosted the event. She spoke to Currents News about why she loves being a Catholic.
Me being a Catholic and growing up in the Catholic faith, what I loved about it was the The idea of changing other people's lives, giving back, and also the idea of miracles.
Church has been at the forefront of art more than anyone in history. The church was the place where artists got their big break. It was used as a way to discover the true, the good, and the beautiful.
For the full lineup of events at the Sheen Center, you can visit their website, sheencenter.org. There's a lot more news headed your way. Rivers were flooding, winds were whipping, and public transportation was shut down. But nothing could stop one couple from declaring their love. And what would you do if Pope Francis appeared at your bedside? One nun got a surprise visit. Neither wind, nor rain, nor hurricane could keep this brass band from dancing or one Catholic couple from declaring their vows. Hurricane Barry threw a wrench into many people in Louisiana's plans earlier this month, but the Hannigan-Hobsons refused to let the storm get in the way of their Cajun wedding. Currents News' Emily Drewby has the story of a love that will weather any storm and a party that will leave you thinking only in New Orleans.
Lily Hannigan met Troy Hobson after moving from the Diocese of Brooklyn to New Orleans. The two fell in love, got engaged, and designed their dream wedding. But Mother Nature had different plans.
Heed every single warning. We're going to get heavy rainfall.
Hurricane Barry threatening to slam Louisiana the day of their Cajun-style wedding.
Our joke was someone upstairs does not want this to happen.
But the resourceful couple refused to let the storm or flooding stand in their way.
We wanted to make sure that we got the ceremony in, like no matter what.
With the cooperation of Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, the couple moved their Catholic ceremony to Friday, alerting guests of the 11th hour change.
I think we sent that message out at like 11.
Yeah.
Like you have 3 hours, get here.
As a lifelong member of the church, the Holy Mass was important to Lily, who attended both St. Mel's and St. Agnes in Queens. But the reception was still scheduled for the next day, Landfall Day.
At noon, I had like a venue coordinator at the space, and she called me and she goes, "Did you hear the news?" Which is always a very ominous way to start a phone call.
The city set a curfew for 8 p.m. right after the reception start time.
We had to move the time up from essentially 7:30 start time to 2:30. This was at noon. Yeah. We were all in our PJ.
But from there, everything fell into place. Hair and makeup was rebooked, flowers were brought in early. They even got outside for the city's traditional second-line wedding reception dance.
She just rolled with every single punch all weekend. Every time a catastrophe struck, she just said, "All right, well, here's what we're going to do. We'll figure this out."
The hurricane ended up barely touching New Orleans.
Our Lady of Prom Sucker is the patron saint of preventing hurricanes, and she came through for us.
The couple proving that together, they can weather any storm. Emily Drewby, Currents News.
Finally tonight, an ailing nun had a special surprise visitor. Pope Francis dropped by to visit Sister Maria Mucci, sick in bed at the infirmary of her congregation's house. Sister Mucci had spent many years serving the Holy Father at Casa Santa Marta. The pontiff also paused for a picture with other members of the Daughters of Charity, as well as employees and guests at the residence. And before the Pope departed, he gave them all a blessing. That is Currents News. I'm Tamara Lane. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.